Hello, everybody. Welcome to Talk About House. I'm Todd.
I'm Oana.
Okay, first thing we want to do is give a shout out to Jim Fisher.
Yes.
Jim Fisher gave us a super thanks.
Yes. So thank you, Jim Fisher. We appreciate it.
We're very grateful for it. It kind of surprised because we don't get a lot. Steve Long Beach did one, and somebody else did one. But we were kind of like, what the heck is this? Why? And then we realized that because the monetization of the YouTube is not as big of a deal for us as just putting out the content and everything. So we're like, and responding to comments. So we're like, what is this? What happened here? And then we realized we got a big super thanks from Jim. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so thank you. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Okay, so we're talking about this article here. It's a housing crash article, but we're going to take the opposite view. Imagine that. Because there's some things in here I just completely don't agree with. But anyway, it says, when will housing market crash? Investor says black swan event is imminent.
Okay, but if it's a black swan event, then it's unforeseen. Therefore, saying that it's imminent then assumes that he has some sort of magical superpowers?
I don't know, but we're going to go through the article. It wasn't really, and we're not going to talk, I'm not going to disparage the guy who made the comment or anything. We're just going to talk about what he said. No, not really. So we'll read the first thing and then I'll explain it. So it says, Sean Terry, former U.S. Marine. First of all, there's no such thing as a former U.S. Marine. You're just a U.S. Marine. And I should know that, being a U.S. Marine. And founder of real estate investing company Flip Freedom recently said on the podcast, Real Estate Disruptors, that the U.S. housing market's high interest rates combined with still high housing prices posing an affordability conundrum that could eventually force something in the market to break. Couple things here. High housing prices in 2019. Housing prices were the highest they'd ever been, right? Right. So couldn't you have said in 2019, well, home prices are so high, they have to go down but in 2018, they were the highest they'd ever been. And in 2017, they were the highest ever been. And in 2016, they were probably the same as they were in 2006. So it's like, at what point, I mean, almost every year, home prices are higher than they are every year in the past.
Well, yeah, and there's also a lot of demand on housing. So keep in mind that housing demand is still really strong. We still have more buyers than we have sellers, so that's an issue. And of course, and we've talked about this quite a bit, as far as we've got the election next year, and maybe the following year we'll have hopefully some sort of immigration policy that may let more people in the country, and then we'll have even more need for housing. So I respectfully disagree with this gentleman. I think that the housing shortage is not something that's going to be remedied anytime soon. So long as you have more buyers than you have sellers, so long as we have more people needing housing than we have housing available, that is a recipe for housing at the very least being stable, if not continuing to increase in value.
The other thing too is, remember, we still have population growth. We don't have population decline. Plus, we have net immigration. Now, remember, net immigration is actually lower right now than it normally is. It's actually lower under Biden than it was under Trump. Even though we have the people coming across the southern border, actual immigration is less because they put stricter rules on it, and they changed some H-1B visa programs. And they send a bunch of people back and stuff, right? But net immigration is still positive, but it's low. So what happens in 2024, maybe new administration comes in and goes, hey, we're going to open this up a little more.
Right. And that's kind of what I envision, that by 2025, maybe we'd have some sort of a revamping of the immigration policy. And that generally brings in immigrants that tend to be better educated, tend to have higher incomes. And then, of course, that drives, home purchases. So all of that kind of works in that direction. But regardless of that, we're still in this situation, to your point, where we have more household formations, we have more need for housing, not enough housing. So all of that, like I said, speaks of it, at the very least, stable housing prices, if not increased in values. Now, clearly that is not in every single market, but it is, by and large across the country.
Okay, here's the next one. I think they're on this path to continue to raise because they want to crash the market. They want affordability to come out, Terry said, of the Fed, first of all.
No, the Fed would never want to crash the market. There are just so many reasons I can't even go there. That's not the Fed's intention. The Fed's intention is number one, to make sure that your money is worth something. And that means that they want to keep inflation low, because if inflation goes up, then your money is worthless. So that's the number one thing that the Fed wants, is the Fed wants inflation to be low. Then, the next thing that the Fed is interested in is having stable employment, right? It's good for the economy, it's good for social stability, it's good for the government, it's good for everybody if we have most people working, right? That's a good thing. So there are all kinds of things on the Fed's agenda as far as what they want to accomplish with the economy, but crashing housing is not one of them.
The other thing is, there's nowhere in the Fed's mandate is home affordability. Like, they don't really care. If they wanted homes to be affordable, they wouldn't have raised jacked up interest rates, right? They're just trying to control inflation, and then they're trying to, primarily, secondarily, jobs, to control the job market, and then, which is an input to inflation on the supply side. And then the third thing is, because they're producing those goods and services, right? And then the third thing is to just make sure the economy is going in the right direction. It's not, going crazy. It's not, collapsing. And they're really more concerned with, having a really, that was, what the problems we had in the 80s, would we have this sort of boom, bust, late 70s, early 80s. It took a while to get out of that.
Right. So as far as home affordability is concerned, not to be disparaging about it, but that is a political issue. That is not an economic issue as far as the Fed is concerned.
Okay. Here's the next quote. To say the Federal Reserve wants a crash isn't entirely accurate, however. The Fed has been trying to balance its rate hikes while steering the U.S. economy toward a soft landing. In other words, curb inflation without causing a deep recession. Last year, Fed Chairman Jerome Powell also said U.S. housing market would likely need to go through a difficult correction before achieving better balance in prices and affordability. Now, I would say we did go through a difficult correction because interest rates went up, and basically those 18% home price appreciation for a couple years, which I think weren't really that much. Indexed, it was less. I think median home prices went up, but I don't think that your $300,000 house is worth, 40% more than it was worth 2 years ago. I don't think that's the case.
Depending on the market.
Depending on the market, maybe. If you're in Florida, it probably is. But and the other thing too is, remember, if he crashes housing is a key. We talked about this. Your rent payment or your mortgage payment is probably your largest single payment. Mm-hmm. Okay, so obviously if they screw with that, they can screw with the rest of the economy.
Well, the other thing to keep in mind is that if home values become depressed, that negatively impacts local governments, right? Because so much of local governments depend on property tax revenue, and property tax revenues are based on home values. So that is not something that the Fed really wants to do, because then they end up having to bail out local governments. So that's not something that they want to do. So there are a lot of reasons why the Fed does not want housing to crash. They want stability. Look, the Fed wants stability in all areas. The last thing they want to do is boom and bust in any section of the economy. That doesn't work for them because they're looking for stability.
Okay. Home prices are controlled by two things: supply and demand. Mm-hmm. All prices. Matter of fact, there's this thing called the demand curve and the supply curve, and where they meet is called price. That's literally how it works. And interest rates are just a factor. They're an input to demand, but they clearly aren't the only input, especially when you have people buying cash or people putting large amounts down. Then that, whatever the interest rate is, plus remember, interest rate's not permanent, it changes. So you refi or do whatever, okay? So what they did was Newsweek went to Lawrence Yun, chief economist for NAR, and they gave some of these quotes. This is what he said. Home prices are not crashing in this scenario, Yun told Newsweek. Home price growth will depend on whether home builders can bring sufficient supply to the market. So this is what that means. If home builders somehow manage to build 1.2 million housing units a year, which is probably what they need to build, then home prices are just going to chill out for the next few years and just kind of do whatever, maybe go up, maybe stay the same, or chill, do whatever. But if they cannot if they cannot build 1.2 million, which is, I think that's the magic number right now. If you look at household formations, And we have to build one house for every 2 household formations, right? Because remember that we have 250,000 houses in the U.S. that disappear every year. They're gone through fire or through other things, eminent domain. They just or they're just completely not livable, right? They're not economically worthwhile to fix up. So if we're only building 700,000-800,000 homes a year, they're trying right now they think they can build 1 million next year, but I doubt they will. They'll probably build 800,000-900,000, and that still is going to put pressure on home prices because people go to the resale market.
Right. So that doesn't mean that people are not going to have anywhere to live, right? There are plenty of apartments going up, so there are other places for people to live. But people generally would like a home of their own. And that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about not having somewhere to live, but we're actually talking about homes available for people to purchase.
Okay. The other scenario Yun said is if an economic recession leads to job losses and in turn forced selling of homes and less consumer confidence. That would also lead to much lower interest rates, which would encourage employed Americans to enter the market. So what would happen is, let's say that your unemployment rate right now, which is 3.8%, which is crazy low unemployment, went all the way up to 7. Well, 7% historically is not, that's where we would be in a mild recession, 7% inflation or unemployment, okay? So 7% unemployment. Well, so what interest rates have dropped substantially. And what would happen is, remember, if you have 7% unemployment, you have 93% employment. So those other 93% of people who all have jobs, who all qualify for loans, now magically interest rates are much lower. So you have 93% of the population now who are still being employed can go buy a house even cheaper. And that sort of, defeats, this idea that 1 or 2% of employment can somehow crash housing. It's never been the case. As a matter of fact, look at the 80s. Remember, home prices every year went up in the 80s. And we had some pretty horrendous years in the 80s, 18% mortgage rates and, I remember 8% unemployment.
Right. And so, look, there are opportunities in every market, and we talk about this a lot. No, we're not saying that 93% of people can all afford a home, but what we are saying is that when you have 93% of people that are employed, a good chunk of them can afford a home. Now, can they all afford, a $20 million home? No. But we don't all require a $20 million home, okay? There are homes in a variety of price ranges, so...
I require that on a beach.
Yes.
On a cliff overlooking a beach, my own beach.
There you go.
With my boat.
Yes.
Which is actually a yacht.
Yes.
It's a super yacht, but that's fine.
You and Abramovich, yes.
Abramovich, me and Abramovich and Elon.
Yes.
Well, Elon, we have a timeshare. We share the boat. He's never on it because he just works too hard.
There you go.
Right.
So, but the point is that, there are always people around who are able to purchase homes, and particularly when you have lower interest rates, that just brings more people into the marketplace. And that's the way economies are supposed to work. Okay,
here's the other scenario that was quote from the article. The economy starts doing not too great. Companies earnings are down. So all of a sudden you have these people not going into the stock market because now price to earning ratios are really bad. The stock market's really overvalued, right? With earnings down. And then here's the scenario. This scenario may cause home prices to rise faster, especially if some wealthy people decide to reallocate investments from the stock market to real estate, Yun said. We will not have a repeat of the 2008 to 2012 housing market crash. There are no risky subprime mortgages that could implode, nor the combination of a massive oversupply and overproduction of homes. In Vegas, you couldn't drive down the street without seeing new homes being built everywhere. Right. And the people buying them I knew people would come to town and buy 5 houses. And they'd say, I'm just going to flip them. I'm going to buy them. And then in 6 months, we're going to close on them. And then we're going to put them on the MLS and sell them and get $50,000 on each one. Then we're going to go right out with that money and go buy 5 more. Because 5 was the magic number to how many loans you could get on the no-doc loan. Right. Where you just stated income, 5, you could buy 5 houses. Right. That was the limit. But only 5. But as we've talked about before, to get a loan now, you have to be well qualified. You have to have a good credit score. You have to have good credit history. You have to have income. You have to have savings, all these things. So all of these are well qualified buyers who are also putting a substantial amount of money down. So those loans that are being initiated now
are loans that are much more likely to be paid and to be paid on time, and they are much less likely to be defaulted on. So that just brings stability to the housing market, and that's still, you know, we still have about a third of houses being purchased cash. Nationally, we have 42% of homes free and clear. That means no loans on them. So again, that's a lot of support for the real estate market. There is no force to sell for these people. And you know, those who choose to sell, they can be patient and to get their magic number. Now, everybody's situation is different, and we recognize that, but we're just kind of speaking in generality, so you get an idea of the detail of the market.
Interest rates could be 10% right now to buy purchase rates, which would affect 0 people who have paid cash, 42% of the market. That many of them would be affected. And then all the people who have existing 30-year mortgages or 15-year mortgages or whatever, which is everybody else that currently has a mortgage. Mm-hmm. All it would choke off is first-time home buyer, probably most other buyers putting less than 20% down. It would probably all go away. People who don't make a lot of money, high-income people could still go out and buy. I think people would, because what they would say is they would just rationalize it. Say, look, okay, interest rates are 10%, but they were 3% a couple years ago. They'll probably be 5% in 2 years. So I'll just buy the house. It's really the one I want. It's going to be a little much for the next couple years, but it'll be fine. I'll just refi it in 2 years. And then now, do we create a problem if 5 years from now we have 5% of the market or 10% of the market where everyone has a 10% loan and interest rates don't go back down? Then we could have a problem. But we're not even like, this is like, we're not even at the stage. This is like when people say, well, Todd, the foreclosures are coming. Well, okay, but I'll be convinced of that when I see the notice of defaults. But we don't have notice of defaults. Matter of fact, we don't have notice of defaults because we don't have the late payments. We have the lowest mortgage delinquency rate we've had in 24 years. Mm-hmm. So when I start to see those leading signs, I'll tell you guys, hey, look, this is starting to happen. We're starting to see this. But we're not seeing any of these things. Like all the things that people have been saying, oh, but the banks have holding on to all these properties. They're not holding on to any properties. There's no magical like parking lot full of houses that the banks are just sitting on waiting, going, oh, let's dump them all at the same time and then crash the housing market, because that way all the other loans we've made on housing will be worthless too.
Right. So, you know, for those people who say that the banks are holding on to all these houses, well, okay, perhaps you're right, but in a different sense. You know, people who are having difficulty making payments, the banks are doing workout plans with them, right? So because the banks learned the last time around, foreclosures are not necessarily profitable and they are very bad optics publicly. So banks are working with people who are having difficulty because it is actually in their best interest, and it also happens to be in the homeowner's interest. That's a good thing. But that also means that these homes will not be coming on the market as foreclosures. They may come on the market as regular sales, but they're not going to come on the market as foreclosures.
If you go into fanniemae.com and look at their most recent update, they do predict they do predict a slowing economy. Mm-hmm. They do predict GDP growth to basically go to about 0, which is soft landing. They predict mortgage interest rates to drop, and they pick home prices to basically just slowly creep up, if not basically kind of, you know, maybe take a 1 or 2 quarter pause. Mm-hmm. But they don't predict any crash. I believe Fannie Mae, they're forward looking before I believe anybody else.
Right.
And they're not far off. So the only people that are really off are the continual people beating the drum of this black swan event that's getting ready to happen. And right. How would you know if there's a black swan event? Black swan event would be something that happens like coronavirus. But we saw what happened with coronavirus, right? Because everyone went out and bought houses.
Right. And, you know, if you're thinking that, well, you know, this is just related to housing, it's not. You know, there are people who are beating the same drum for the stock market. They're saying, well, the stock market is an all-time high, and so that's going to take a 50% cut too. I mean, you know, wherever there's money invested, you have people who are beating the crash drums, because if it bleeds, it leads, right? They get lots of eyeballs, they get lots of clicks, and that's certainly, I would say, part of the motivation for holding that point of view publicly.
And we certainly, so we have substantial stock market exposure, just like we do in the real estate market. But, you know, what are you going to do, right? You can't. I mean, they said 10 years ago, the stock market, oh, the stock market's it's overbought, it's too high. And then, you know, now, oh, price to earnings ratio, the economy's really bad. Why are the prices so high? And here we are. And, you know, in Tesla, you know, Tesla's worth 400 times or whatever, what it was worth 10 years ago.
The bottom line is that there's a lot of wealth out there, both in this country and globally, and it's being invested in real estate and in the stock market. I mean, where else are you going to put it? So yes, these particular asset classes are expensive. I'll agree with you. But if you've got money, where else are you going to put it? Because if you put it under your mattress, it's going to be eaten away by inflation. So take your pick. Put it under the mattress and have it be eaten away by inflation. Put it in the stock market and maybe that crashes. Put it in housing, maybe that crashes. Or most people have some combination of the three and hope for the best.
My outlook going forward is we're at 42%. I think by 2030, 50% of all homes in the country are owned free and clear. Because remember, of that 58% of homes, some of those people have less than 7 years of payments left. I have 5 years left of payment, so they make 5 years of payments. Now they own house free and clear. That number tends to not go the other direction. It tends to. That's been the trend for the last 20 years, and it really started, I think, in 2009-10, the bottom of the market when the housing market imploded. The one time that we said the housing market would implode, basically did.
Right.
And then all these people come out with cash. We had over 50% of all purchases. Like I said, we had a guy show up. He bought 50 houses cash. Right. He just said, I want to buy 50 houses and I'm going to buy them all cash.
And he wasn't the only one. I mean, a lot of people purchase homes cash for a number of reasons. One, because they had the cash. Two, because maybe they did a strategic default where they stopped making payments on their house. Took a while to foreclose. In the meantime, they kept saving money. So by the time they got foreclosed, then they had money to go out and buy a similar house cash, you know, whatever their situation was. So there were a lot of cash purchases. The other thing is that, you know, we're rather removed now. We're 10 years plus from the housing crash. So people were able to purchase homes, purchase them inexpensively, even those that weren't purchased cash. And those homes are in the process of getting paid off. And to your point, they probably will be paid off for the most part by 2030 between purchasing them at depressed values and being able to refinance over time for low interest rates and that combination. You know, it means a lot of people will have paid off homes. This is a good thing. Like I said, this just provides a lot of stability for the housing market. It provides stability for people in their homes, and it makes them feel safe, and it makes it good to own a home and have control over your housing costs. Those are all good things.
Plus, I would rather put up my Halloween decorations than my housing crash decorations.
All right, so we'll consider that.
Yep.
All right, so what do you think? Is housing going to crash? Is the stock market going to crash? Is the inflation going to go through the roof? You know, cats and dogs living together, you know, frogs raining down from the sky. What's going to happen? Give us your take in the comments. We love hearing from you. You don't have to agree with us. Please remember to tell us where you're watching from, and we look forward to your comments. Remember to like the video, subscribe, hit the notification bell, share the video, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye.
Bye.